All right, it seems like we've got quite a few people in the room, so we will get started. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll be talking about Modern Slavery PEC's latest call on understanding and addressing modern slavery with data science methods. My name's Izzy Templer. I'm the Research, Operations and Communications Manager at the Modern Slavery PEC, and me and my colleague Alex will be talking you through today's presentation. So before we get started, just going to take you through some housekeeping. For today's presentation, we ask that everybody stays on mute and keeps their video off, and we'll swap the settings in the Q&A, so you'll be able to raise your hand and ask questions. But also, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat at any time during today's presentation, and we'll pick them up at the end. If you have any technical problems, also just drop us a message in the chat and we'll do our best to help resolve those for you. We are recording today's webinar to share on our website. We won't be recording the Q&A section. Instead, what we'll do is write up the questions and answers alongside anything we've received over email into an FAQ document that we'll add to the call's webpage. I'm just going to put some meeting rules for today in the chat. These are particularly for when we have our Q&A section. These are just to make sure that today's meeting is a sort of safe space where people are able to take part in the conversation freely and feel safe doing so. Just please be mindful that there might be people on today's call who have lived experience with modern slavery, so just familiarise yourself with these meeting rules before the Q&A begins. In terms of the agenda for today, we'll be going through an introduction to modern slavery PEC and an overview of this research call, including going through the application process and then a bit of how we'll work with the successful project teams, and we'll leave plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. So I'll hand over to Alex now, who's going to talk you through an introduction to modern slavery PEC.
Thanks, Izzy, and hi everyone. My name's Alex Balch. I'm Director of Research at the Modern Slavery PEC, and I'm also on secondment from the University of Liverpool Politics Department. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the PEC and the call. Apologies if some of you have heard about the Modern Slavery PEC before, but I think it's worth saying what makes us distinct as a funder, and then also what is specifically distinct about this call. So what are we? We are a centre that is made up of 6 research institutes, and we've been set up by UKRI funding to enhance understanding of modern slavery across the globe. So that means improving the quality of research and evidence with a view to improving policies and laws. So it's really about translation of evidence into the hands of decision makers to try and improve how we address modern slavery. So how do we do that? Well, we fund. We are a funder, but we are more than a funder. So we do commission and we do put out open calls and we fund research teams to do independent research. But we work together with those teams, and this is a really important part of our work, to connect the research with the policymaking community. So it's about translation, it's about collaboration, and it's about building bridges between different stakeholders to try and improve the quality of the evidence and to bring people together to improve decisions and policies on modern slavery. So we started our work with a consultation process that established our priorities and our guiding principles. So while we do fund open calls such as this, where people can propose any research that fits this scope, we do ask people to consider aligning with our guiding principles. And this came out of the consultation process. And it was really about the desire from policymakers and researchers for more work that looked at effectiveness, equity and survivor involvement. So basically that means looking at what works and what doesn't work and providing evidence for that, but doing that in a way that also cuts across issues of equity and equitable involvement. So that means not just thinking about the structural causes of modern slavery, but also how the research is conducted, to making sure that the research is conducted in an equitable and ethical way. And that brings us on to the third principle, which is involving those with lived experience in the research itself, not just as participants, but thinking about how we can include people most affected in the actual research process. So that could be as peer researchers, as people leading research projects, and we've also increased the ability for partnerships involving NGOs, third sector organisations to get involved in research. So we're interested in widening the diversity of people involved in the research process, but not just for the sake of it, to also improve the quality of the evidence and making sure that the research is, more appropriately targeted towards the needs of those most affected. So we have 4 main research areas: victim and survivor support, prevention, supply chains, and legal enforcement. But we are flexible and we look at emerging and urgent needs for research. So that could be, for example, the pandemic, where we funded 11 projects looking at the links between COVID-19 and modern slavery. But it could also mean new and emerging issues and challenges that are always happening in this area. What we're looking at today is really a more cross-cutting theme of methods and how new methods can be used to really help us understand and address modern slavery. So yeah, that brings us to this research call, and this is one of our open calls. So that means that we set the parameters, but then we invite anyone to put together a team and to put together a proposal that fits within the scope, and then we obviously sift and then assess those in a way that we'll explain later. So why are we doing this, and why are we interested in data science approaches to this field? Well, there's a number of reasons. First of all, it's, I think, fairly well understood that there's a great potential for data science to improve understanding on public policy issues such as modern slavery, particularly where there's, it's a complex phenomenon, complex challenge, but there are lots of available data sets that may not have been exploited for insights and understanding. So it's that combination of understanding the phenomenon itself, but also providing insights in a timely and accessible way for policymakers. Now, in our consultation, which I mentioned earlier, we did hear very loud and clear that there's a desire amongst the sector for greater data sharing and for the potential of large data sets to be used for all sorts of aspects of this, whether it's prevention, whether it's protection, or indeed whether it's looking at company supply chains and how best to manage those. So stakeholders have told us time and again that data, is a great potential, but we're yet to see enough examples of where research has provided really good insights and really good evidence from data science approaches. So we want to open up the call to ask people to come up with research projects that use data science methods to either enhance understanding of the phenomenon of modern slavery or to transform the effectiveness of laws and policies designed to address it. And just an asterisk there in terms of what we mean by data science methods. We're taking a fairly broad view of that, and it's really about all the different disciplines that are normally understood to form part of data science, and of course all of those disciplines bringing a range of different tools and techniques. So it really does encompass quite a lot of different possibilities, but all of them having in common the use of large data sets. So just to take you through the objectives, and we tried to simplify these, but basically every project must meet objective A, and then they are allowed to meet either objective B or C. So I'll explain how that works. So objective A is really about alignment with the PEC's mission. So we want projects and proposals to use data science methods to develop evidence-based recommendations for policymakers. And that's because as a policy and evidence centre, all of our work needs to in some way address the challenge for policymakers. So we need to think about all of our outputs as how can they help policy be done better. So all projects need to address objective A, and we would ask to align with our guiding principles of effectiveness, equity, and involvement of people with lived experience, as I mentioned earlier. But just another couple of points here. We do obviously understand that combined or mixed method approaches may be the most appropriate depending on the issue or topic that you're addressing. So we do allow that, but we would ask that data science approaches form the most important part of that. Thirdly, we may see projects that are suggesting the use of local partnerships or networks or developing structures to enable exploitation of data where perhaps organizations or networks have data sets that are not sufficiently clean to do analysis. So there could be a sort of development element to this as well. So once you've got objective A, which is the very broad sense of evidence to help policymakers, objective B is about thinking about the changing nature of modern slavery. So changing patterns, changing threats, trends, new forms of exploitation, particular population groups, geographical areas or exploitation types. So this is about helping policymakers to react to how the nature of modern slavery is changing in the UK. Now here we expect people may consider using existing data sets or new data sets. This may include publicly available data, as the UK's national referral mechanism data is now more readily available, recently has been made more readily available. And there are other data sets out there. We would recommend you look at what administrative data is available, but also, as I said, this could be from organizations, third sector, service providers who have data. If you are using something that's publicly available and readily and already been analysed, we would ask that there is a sort of innovative component. So that could be an innovative method or approach, or it could be a combination of data sets that has never been done previously. And then finally, objective C is really about the decision-making benefits of data science methods. So how can data science methods help, in terms of policy, service delivery, or it could be governance of supply chains by companies. So this may be scaling up of existing approaches where there's an excellent or new approach to use data science, or it could be applying approaches that have been used elsewhere. And this could be about looking at the barriers and obstacles around data usage, but we do want to make it clear we don't want the project just to be looking at barriers and obstacles. That obviously is going to be part of most projects or most proposals, but we don't want that to be the only or primary focus of the research. And then just to give you some of the sort of the important scope issues, we have tried to limit this a bit because well, first of all, data science approaches covers an enormous range of possible techniques and methods, but we also are aware that this is not the largest call, that the projects are not enormous. They're sort of medium-sized projects, and there is a time limit, and that does actually relate to our own time limit in terms of how long we have funding to give. So we wanted to narrow things a bit. I've already mentioned we wouldn't like just to focus on ethical issues or barriers. I've already mentioned about ongoing analysis. We wouldn't want to just fund ongoing analysis, but we want something novel or innovative. But we have limited it to exclude the estimation of prevalence on modern slavery, and I can talk about that a bit more in the Q&A. But the idea there is that that's a very challenging and difficult task, and this is a reasonably, as I said, modest and limited time scope project. So we felt that it would be better if we exclude that from the scope. So just to finish off, what should you think about when you're making your expression of interest? And Izzy will take you through the process, but we've tried to set the bar a bit lower on the expression of interest stage as a means of bringing more people into the potential applicants. We want to diversify applications, so we don't want to make it too difficult to do an expression of interest. So it's really about showing us you have something novel, something that will add value and will be beneficial, as I said, for policymakers or decision makers. But just to bear in mind, you should be using concise language and clear language, because we will be assessing your proposals with a mix of academic and non-academic assessors, and our work does need to be read and understood, and our outputs read by non-academic audiences. So have that obviously in the front of your mind when you're when you're putting your proposal together. And as you'll see, although the expression of interest stage does not require, extensive data sharing agreements to be in place, and to be formalized, we do want you to tell us how feasible it is, your plans for data sharing. We are aware that data sharing can be complex and difficult to get agreement on. So what we'd like to see in the expression of interest stage is that you've thought through what the practical challenges are to whatever data sets you're looking to get access to, and that you've got a project that is feasible. We understand there's risk involved, and it's good to have some risk, just that risk is well thought out and you have strategies in place to mitigate that. So I'll hand back now to Izzy, who'll tell you a bit more about the application process.
Thanks very much, Alex. So I'm just going to talk through the application process for this call. As Alex mentioned, this is a two-stage process that we're running for this call. So there's an expression of interest that needs to be submitted to us by the 4th of August at 4 p.m. After that, we will review these internally with an aim to turn around as quickly as possible and open stage 2, which will be for the full application, where you'll be required to submit full documentation, and there'll be 5 weeks to do this after stage 2 opens. We'll aim to get decisions out to successful teams by October 2022 to give you as long as possible to get those data sharing agreements set up. I'm looking for projects to start in January 2023. When the project's running, we'll be engaging really closely with the projects, meeting with them roughly every 6 weeks, potentially more or less, depending on the stage of the project that you're in. And from November, wintertime in 2023 onwards, we'll be working with the teams to collaborate on your final reports and research summaries. We're looking for projects to close in January 2024. Alex mentioned this earlier, we've also included it in the call document, but the Slavery PECS funding runs up until March 2024. So projects will need to conclude by this stage. So it's really important to consider feasibility and timelines, and that's something that we'll really look for in applications. In terms of eligibility for this call, projects need to be led by a UK higher education institution or an independent research organisation that's eligible to receive UKRI funding. But projects have to demonstrate a collaboration between the lead institution and a third sector organisation based in the UK. Projects can also include other partners such as businesses or subcontractors. If there are other partners that you're looking to bring into your project and you're not sure about the eligibility of that partnership, just always feel free to drop us an email at office@modernslaverypec.org, and we'll be really happy to discuss that with you and advise on the best way to factor that partnership into your project. International partners are eligible on this call and can receive up to 30% of the budget. I'll go through the budget breakdowns in a little bit. And it's just really important to note that you have to submit an expression of interest to be eligible to put in a full application for this funding call. So that deadline of the 4th of August is really important. In terms of the funding available, the maximum budget for this call is £250,000 at full economic cost. For those who are potentially coming from outside of research, you'll see the term full economic cost, or FEC, referred to throughout the core documentation. Basically what this means is the actual cost of the project, and the reason why this is important is because different partners in a project will be funded at different rates. So higher education institutions and research organisations will be funded at 80%, so for every £1 they spend, we'll reimburse them for 80p. Third sector organisations and international partners will be funded at 100% of the full economic cost. So for every £1 they spend, we will reimburse them £1. These are standard UKRI rules, but again, if you've got any questions about this when you're putting your application together, we're more than happy to talk that through. Up to 50% of the full cost of a project can be allocated to third sector organisations and international partners. International partners are capped at receiving 30% of the funding. So there's when you move from stage 1 to 2, we'll send out a lot more detail about the funding breakdowns and some examples of different budgets and how they'll work, because the budget isn't required at the expression of interest stage, but it's just important to keep these things in consideration when you're looking to form your teams. So I'm just going to talk through what working with the Modern Slavery PEC looks like for these projects. Working with a PEC is quite different to working with other research funders because we're a policy and evidence centre. So whilst we're working with teams to generate evidence, we'll also be working really closely with you to transform the evidence into policy impact. And this is really why we were established by the HRC. It's for us to be really hands-on with projects, these regular meetings, collaborating on outputs is something that's really important to our ways of working with project teams. On this slide, we've just got a selection of the different experiences that are within that we have in the Modern Slavery PEC teams. You can see there's a real range of advice and support that we can offer to project teams. So we'll be working closely with the successful projects in a range of different areas. Toward the end of the project, we'll be looking for projects to produce a variety of outputs. Some of them will produce with the projects throughout the course of their work. So each project will have a policy impact and partnership plan that will be put together with members of our team. So that will sort of really break down who the key influencing targets and partnership targets are for your research so that we can help to support you with facilitating this impact. We'll also work with projects to create a communications plan. So you can see on our website we have blogs, we have podcasts, we have a variety of ways we work with our teams on communications, and it would be great to see in applications how you foresee your project might get involved in that. All projects will be required to produce a final report, which is a 10,000 word report. This will be done in collaboration with the PEC, so we would sort of expect to do 2 rounds of feedback, really working with the team to maximise the impact of their research through this report. And we'll also work with teams to produce a research summary. So again, if you have a look at our website, you can see some examples of reports and research summaries from projects that have finished. And this is a really key way of us being able to engage with policymakers on the outcomes of research.